we're in the Wild West right now. We're still trying to figure out how to live successfully with the alien race that now is. I shouldn't keep saying it, but you get what I'm saying.
No, I like it.
We
I
have,
like it a lot.
we have that new technology, and we're trying to figure out how to be able to properly deal with it.
Welcome to Embracing Digital Transformation, where we investigate effective change leveraging people, process, and technology. This is Darren Pulsford, Chief Solution Architect, author, and most importantly, your host. On today's episode, Securing Information by Embracing Private GenAI and RAG, with guest Jeff Marshall, Senior VP at FedData. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Darren. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Hey, you reached out to me. It was a cold call almost. And I said, "Oh, I get these all the time. We'll see what these guys have to say." But I was impressed. I was like, "Wow, there's something here that we need to talk about." But before we get diving into the problem space and what we're going to talk about today around generative AI, Jeff, my audience wants to know a little bit about you. So, hey, where do you come from, Jeff? Who is Jeff Marshall?
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So I'm Jeff Marshall. I'm originally from upstate New York. Went directly into the Army after high school, and I absolutely love serving. And I started seeing as a young private the big issues that the military had with making decisions and sometimes getting things done. Fast forward to I started working with the DOD and the IC community to start advising on different types of technologies. And then I came back to the Army side, which was my passion and where I grew up. And so I try to be able to help find new ways to be able to solve these big problems that the federal government and the Army has. And on the side, I'm an actor and a stunt man. And so I get to play with
That's right. I remember this now. So you guys all have to look up Jeff Marshall on his IMDb. Follow him on Instagram. Let's get his next movie, like up there, right? Jeff needs to feed his family, right?
Yeah, and I like to take that kind of entertainment stuff and make little videos and try to be able to entertain and educate. And I think it's been really good. So
no, that's really awesome. So Jeff, what did you do in the Army?
So I was a radio crypto repairer, and so I was a combat guy, and spent a lot of time in the field in Korea, and then I got stationed at the Pentagon, and it all took off from there. So
that's awesome. So right now you're the Senior VP of Federal and DOD for FedData.
That's right.
What does FedData have anything to do with generative AI? Because that's what we're talking about today.
Good question. I mean, so originally, we started off as a reseller, and for the love of what we do, reselling is great, but when you're just pushing pieces of plastic and metal, it's not solving the big problems. So FedData, we have data scientists, we have our own engineers, and we sat around one day and said, hey, why don't we make some sort of special sauce to be able to put on this hardware, try to solve some real problems, and that's what we started doing. And so I think we kind of redefined how we were as a value-added reseller.
Gotcha. So how have you seen AI? I mean, this whole AI thing, it's only about 18 months old since GenAI really took off. But AI has been around a long time. What changes have you seen over the last 18 months? Because you guys have been doing AI stuff for some time. So what has changed in the last 18 months?
It's interesting. I mean, like you mentioned, we have 18 months of time. November 2022 is where the world was.
November 30th. Yeah. I have it written down.
And it blew my mind. And I think what first happened was, this is the first time in probably 30 some odd years, I feel like I'm a pioneer at something again, trying to be able to start from new. It was almost like an alien race. A friendly alien race came to the world, and suddenly we have to figure out how to coexist with it. And I feel like that's really where we are. We looked at how we did IT and how we dealt with communication and data, and everything changed that one day. And so I think what's changed the most for me is trying to be able to just educate customers, trying to educate, this is what generative AI is. This is how you communicate. This is how you prompt. This is what good data is. This is what bad data is. So I think that's the big change is seeing, how we've gone from communicating with spreadsheets to being able to have collaboration with data.
I think it's interesting how you compared it to like this alien came here because we created generative AI,
Mhm.
and I think the way you mentioned that was really fascinating because even the creators of Gen AI did not know how to really react to it.
Right.
Right? There's a whole new thing called prompt engineering.
Mhm.
Prompt engineering didn't exist 18 months
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So we're still learning how to interact with these generative AI models
Mhm.
still, right?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and if I can, Darren, the other thing too is, I think when you and I first talked about it too, I talked about the Wild West. Anyone that says that they know exactly how this is playing out and exactly how the rules are, it's not true. We're in the Wild West right now. We're still trying to figure out how to live successfully with the alien race that now is. I shouldn't keep saying it, but you get what I'm saying.
No, no, I like it.
We
I
have
like it a lot.
with that new technology, and we're trying to figure out how to be able to properly deal with it. And what I also think is really interesting is when you have somebody and you're really excited to show them generative AI and how it can kind of change the world, and you put a keyboard in front of them and you say, "Go ahead, you have a chat, have a conversation," and you watch people freeze because it goes back to that prompt engineering. We almost have to learn how to be able to talk to a robot, and people get a little intimidated by that. So customers have a little bit of that education time and that cultural shift that they're going to be dealing with each year.
I actually think it's a profound shift because we're used to talking to computers a certain way. Google taught us that,
Mhm.
right? Google taught us to not speak in full sentences, but only give
Right,
keywords,
right.
right? Now I'm talking to a generative AI where full sentences mean a lot more to it than a bunch of keywords.
Mhm.
So we're actually devolving. No, we're evolving. We're now the computer can now talk more naturally with us.
Mhm.
So we've got to be comfortable now talking to the computer in a more natural way. Because I found I do the same thing when I'm on ChatGPT or Cloud or Gemini. I'm out there doing the old thing I used to do. Keywords structured a certain way because that's how I got the best results out of Google or Bing search or whatever. I'm doing the same thing with ChatGPT, and it doesn't give me as good of results as if I type in, 3 or 4 sentences on exactly what I want. It does a lot better job.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, it's someone said something interesting once, and I believe it. Like you were saying, Darren, it's we learned how to kind of be choppy with our requests. Show me cat video, like that would be it.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
But one person said an interesting side effect of generative AI is we're going to be able to learn how to communicate with each other more clearly. Because, and I liken it, and by the way, I love my ex-wife to pieces. We're best friends, but I always used to make fun of her for this because we would be having a conversation, blah, blah, blah. Did you clean? Did you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And how'd that thing go? And I'd be like, how what thing go? And she left context, which was a hallucination. So this is going to force us have to learn how to be able to communicate better to each other too, and I think that's great.
No, I like how you said that because, and maybe the Gen Z is going to have a harder time with ChatGPT because Gen Z is so used to very short and terse communication through texting and messaging and Snapchat and things like that, right?
Mhm.
So I think we're at an interesting dilemma. I guess is the right word.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, because yeah, I do that too. Even in my emails, which I've tried to do better at by actually leveraging Grammarly to
Mhm.
say, and Grammarly has a Gen AI on the back end to say, hey, I know this is really badly written. Can you express it in a more, a certain tone or whatever? And I've noticed all my emails are starting to be much better. What I'm writing is getting better
Yeah.
because I have this aid that's helping me instead of just giving a couple words and saying generate it yourself.
So I do think I'm horrible at typing. I'm this guy, So
Uh-huh.
what I also find is interesting is when I'm typing, my typing is full of spelling mistakes, And
Oh, same
AI,
here.
well, AI does a great job. And then people are like, "Oh, you made a spelling mistake." When I'm teaching classes, I go, "Oh, it's fine. It'll completely read through it." I do think that we're going to find, and we've kind of talked about generative AI being an amazing translator in the future, but also it can bridge generation gaps. So, for example, and we just tested this out. It was a millennial was using all sorts of slang that I didn't understand. And I said, "Let's try this." And they started asking generative AI in slang, and generative AI still understood it. So it almost bridged what I was trying to
Oh, interesting.
understand. And so it's really good at bridging not just languages, but also slang and some generation gap things. It was exciting to watch.
Very, very cool. All right, so let's talk about. I mean, the public Gen AI has completely changed everyone.
Mhm.
Right? It's changed education. It's changed what I do at work every day. My wife. It changes how she does shopping.
Mhm.
It changes everything, right?
Every-
So, but that's public. Aren't what are some of the fears that we're seeing out there with public Gen AI, especially when it comes to government?
yeah, great question. So, when we talk about that November 2022 timeframe, which was the 30th, 31st, it was about
30th, yeah.
days later, I went, "Oh no, what do we do now?" And when I have something private and I have something classified or sensitive, anytime I'm typing that into one of the public Gen AI solutions, that's really not your data anymore. That now is owned by whoever is the host provider. And I don't want to throw companies' names under the bus, but
Well, I'll throw them all under the bus,
okay,
right? Yeah, it's
OpenAI, so chat.
OpenAI and Microsoft and Google and Meta. That I mean, these are information brokers, and now
That's it.
with the Gen AI on the front end,
They have
they're getting even more data,
They have
right?
everything they'd ever want. So that became the original fear was, what do we do now? And like the government's first move is, well, block it. It's gone. We will never have this again. But my
Well, so what's the danger in doing that, though? I mean, yeah, what is the danger of saying government employees cannot use public Gen AI because there is data leakage problems?
absolutely,
Period. I don't care what any of the big boys say. There is data leakage problems.
yeah.
That is an issue.
And here's the thing too is even if I'm not giving directly classified information, if I'm not giving something that because sometimes people go, well, it wasn't classified, it was just a little thing. AI is amazing at taking little breadcrumbs and baking full loaves of bread out of it.
Yes, it is.
And so that's and it's not just you entering information, it's a whole bunch of other people drop breadcrumbs, and that stuff gets recreated and then gets retrained in potentially GPT-5. And then the adversaries are now asking very, very specific questions and getting very specific intel back on things we don't want them to know. So that is the scariest part of what this is it's it's you're sharing everything.
So why not just ban it? Why not just say government employees cannot use Gen AI?
And that's really what they came down and did. The government, shut down links to chat GPT, but the user starts, they go home, what they use at home, they want to have at work. These incredible tools that they have at home, they come in and go, my hands got chopped off. Like, how am I supposed to do my job
Yeah.
when the genie has been let out of the bottle and I see this incredible thing? So what happens is the government, lovingly goes to 9 years of committee, or whatever. And then all of a sudden, people are sitting there going, hands still tied. And then what happens is they go home at night and innocently go and they get onto ChatGPT, they solve their problems and bring it back to work. They weren't using it at work, but they went home and used it. So we have more danger in scenarios like that happening because we have not given the tools that they demand. And the user will overrule these things. So
Well, yeah, because people want to get their jobs done, right? They're going to use the best tools available, and if they don't, then my fear is that we fall behind.
yeah, absolutely.
Because in fact, I've already seen it starting to happen. Europe has very strict rules on generative AI, not just in government, but period. Japan has opened it wide open.
Mhm.
Other companies have opened it wide open. We're kind of in the middle. We're in this malaise of, I don't know, what should we do? And the companies that are, or the countries that are progressing fastest in this new technology are those that are more open
Yeah.
to using. But there's dangers in that too, which we already discussed. So how? I mean, this generative AI can be an incredible tool, but so we need something in between. We can't just say
We do.
everything's going to be run in a public Gen AI. We need something else.
Right. Yep. And that would come with a private generative AI solution, and even if they wanted to do it where, I know there's fear of if you take a brand new generative AI solution, you plug it into the network, there's a lot that goes to that. But I think there's a lot of value in bringing a generative AI solution, making maybe a small network, maybe a small number of users, and start testing what does your data do? What are the use cases? What are you recognizing your people are doing? How is it handling your organization's data? Like there's all sorts of things that they could try just by getting small samples into their environment.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about that because I don't know that everyone understands what a private Gen AI really is.
mm,
Because and we can blame the big cloud service providers for this, frankly, because they're offering generative AI as a service or gas. I don't know how we're going to call it, right? They're offering it as a service right now, but those aren't truly private
right,
Gen AI. They're
right,
still running in the cloud, and they're still running models that are being generated and optimized in the cloud.
right,
What we're talking about is running a large language model on your data center,
correct.
right? That's what we're talking about, right?
Talking about. Yep. It's and like you said, so it's also dangerous. I should add that everybody and their brother right now is saying they have this. They have something to provide as a solution to be able to do this, and almost none of them really do. But or that's kind of under the auspice of oh look, it's cloud, you can trust us. But yeah, to be able to have it where you're running an actual large language model inside your environment, and to be able to take your data and be able to apply it to that, and it has zero dependencies on the internet. You have zero companies who have some sort of interaction with your data. That's how I see private Gen AI.
Okay, so private Gen AI, if I go that route, it sounds like it could be very expensive because I want it to train on my own data. So do I need to train these large language models on my own data? Because that means I need to go buy a bunch of GPUs to do training. I'm going to spend because how many hundreds of millions of dollars did OpenAI, spend to train their models?
Right, right.
So there seems like there's a big, huge barrier to entry here. Is that true, or are there
No,
other options that
no,
I can look at?
it's a wonderful question. There are lots of options right now. So there are a lot of large language models available right now. A lot are most have some level of free usage. You have to check the licensing and see what it says, but you can do a starter kit for a pretty small amount of money to be able to have a small number of GPUs running a large language model. And then what I recommend to customers is RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation. So that allows you to be able to take your own documents, your own PDFs. And what happens is instead of having to train those large language models, those are already trained. Those, one of the ways I kind of explain the difference is a large language model I always see as like a high school graduate. It's got some level of knowledge, it has some level of creativity, it has some level of problem solving. But then you take on top, and so that's your large language model. But then on top of
Okay.
that, you take your documents and you now apply them against that large language model, and now you can ask questions against your own data sets, your own documents.
Okay, so those documents are a RAG, a retrieval augmented
That's right.
generation.
Yeah.
Okay, so RAG plus Gen AI, and I have to espouse, right? Intel can actually run Gen AI large language models just on servers. I
Mhm.
don't need any GPUs,
True.
just so you know,
Yeah, yeah.
Jeff.
I just yeah.
Right, especially lately. I mean, we just optimized Llama 3, which is an open model,
Mhm.
Llama 3 to run on our on our CPUs, and they're beating GPUs right now, which is incredible.
Yeah,
when you think
I'm
about
really excited to try it. We initially started playing with llama, but there was restrictions that couldn't be used in federal or military, which has been lifted. So, uh,
Well, that brings up another question I have for you. On these large language models that I can download off of like Hugging Face or things like that, can I trust the models?
oh,
Because I mean, they were trained, right? They were trained, but I don't know the data they were trained on. I don't know who curated the data.
yep.
We know that large language models are highly biased, right? They're biased off the data they were trained with. So how do I establish any kind of trust of these models so that I can use them?
It's hard. It really is. I mean, and it said you're going to keep on hearing me go back to the Wild Wild West. We're there. We're in the Wild West, and almost everything's happening. Right now, we are at the point where we have to have some level of trust in your provider, and there are a number of different large language models. And I listen to all sorts of speakers talk about in the future how do we protect the large language model, because the sanctity of the data that's being trained on is what we're going to become dependent on. Like when I ask a question and it gives me an answer, I'm going to believe that answer. But if that data becomes corrupted, if there's some organization that wants to dirty the data with their own perspective, that becomes a problem. So there are.
Well, hasn't that already happened then? Possibly. We don't know, right?
I mean, I think that it's reasonable that someone has put the perspective. Actually, I just saw one. I was on ChatGPT and I was asking questions about how it believed the movie industry changed because of AI. So I was asking it what I,
Uh-huh.
and then and I said, do you replace jobs? And it goes, oh no, I create more jobs. So then I started really trying to be able to pull it, and what I saw was they use what's called guardrails, to
Right.
be able to force the answer, and they were giving it their version of the answer, and I thought that was very interesting. So that was the first time I ever saw um, someone changing the results of what the answer was, and if I asked it a certain way, it started saying, not to get too far into this, but I said, if I had 100 animators and Sora came in and replaced 98 of them and I only need 2 supervisors, doesn't that replace people's jobs? And if I asked a certain number of questions, it would say yes. But then it would go back and say, but it creates more jobs. So anyways, so there's all sorts of different ways to do it.
Gotcha. Okay, so going into this, we need to understand a couple things about LLMs, even if we're doing a private one, because with a private one, I don't have the data leakage anymore, right? Because it's self-contained. It's not going out the internet.
Yep.
In fact, I can run this in a bunker, 5 stories underground with no internet connectivity, and it'll still work.
Right. That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
So,
So, but now you've got something that now you've got an LLM that I have to now trust
right.
or at least understand its bias.
Yeah. Yep. And
Okay.
we have, yeah, the LLM, I think most people agree that the LLM has the highest potential of being the insider threat. And it's based on its source and how it's trained and what the data is. This is going to be a problem. This is something that we all have to solve. Some of the large language models have started move to open source so that they can have some level of public scrutiny. I think that's going to be a piece of it, but we've got a long way to go. I mean, there are other ways of looking of having multiple LLMs kind of test and judge each other.
I've started doing that myself. I use multiple LLMs, right, and compare results.
And I like it. I actually do like the way that works. But I think this conversation we have today, 3 years from now, it's going to be a completely different conversation. I mean, that's
Oh
an
yeah.
obvious thing, but yeah, a little Wild West. We're trying to figure it out. But yeah, the fear of the attack of the LLM, of the corruption of the data, or the bias of the data is the scary piece. But right now, it's we've been pretty happy with it, and that's, if I can, one other thing too, is that's why it's nice with this RAG model. The LLM is the basis, but the data is your
The data is yours. So with a RAG, I can improve the trust,
Mhm.
right? Because it's based off of my data. And so let's give an example. One I'm working with the Department of Corrections. And they have tens of thousands of pages of policy on what to do in every situation you can imagine. So a guard sitting in a prison um, has a lot of reading that they do and training that they do.
Mm-hmm.
But when a situation comes up, they flip open the manual and try and find what's going on. That could take
Hard.
several minutes or an hour. Meanwhile, you got mass chaos could be going on in the prison.
Yep.
A Gen AI with a RAG containing all of those policies, I could easily ask it, what do I do in this situation? And the bias that the LLM had beforehand is going to be somewhat overridden by
Your own
the
data.
policies that I've established
Yep.
there.
And that's a really important piece too, because we use that all the time. And even if I had the LLM was being a little bit feisty, it doesn't matter. My data, because I trust my data, because I put my data there, does it. And that's a great use case about the prison guards. I always liken it to the easiest one I think everyone should start with is your human resource handbook, your employee handbook. Because
Yeah, HR handbook. That's a good one.
but it's the easiest one because everyone always has HR questions. How much leave do I have? How much this? Am I allowed to do this? And quite honestly, most people don't really read the handbook. And if I do, Control F, and I'm trying to find an answer as a manager, but I can very quickly ask a PDF of HR policies questions, and it gives me answer. That's always the starting point, I say, because people will immediately get it and they'll accept it. And it doesn't take a lot of training, doesn't take a lot of over knowledge of different things. So yeah.
All right, let's talk quickly. How do I set up these? The RAG seems like it handles a lot of issues that we have with LLMs, both privacy, trust, bias, all the things that we normally see. How easy is it to set up these RAG? Do I just drop all my documents into one big database and I'm set? I'm ready to go, or is there a lot more going on here? And can I do it in an afternoon, or is it going to take me 3 or 4 months of data scientists looking at my data and things like that? How do I go about tackling this?
Yeah. So if you wanted to make a single instance, something that was run on your desktop for yourself, it's pretty simple. It really is pretty simple. And in fact, what I tell people is just open ChatGPT and say, hey, I want to run something local. And it'll actually run you through the steps of how to be able to set something up very simply.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So if you wanted to do that, you could do that. My fear on that, and by the way, for people that want to play around, that's a great way to be able to kind of try the LLM out. I mean, it's almost like making your first little motorcycle. You're grabbing the little engine, the
Yeah,
tire,
yeah, yeah.
you're making something. So it's fun to do that. But when we're dealing with enterprise, I always warn people that I can make a hamburger at my house, but that doesn't make me Burger King. So I'm always hesitant because we have a lot of companies out there right now who their stock would shatter onto the ground if they said they didn't have the leading solution in AI. So
Of course, yeah.
they're coming up with these little desktop mini motorcycles and saying they're enterprise level. But that's so I just be careful with the snake oil salesman right now. But that's kind of how you start. It's not overly difficult to be able to do it, and the RAG model is pretty easy too. If you wanted to be a data scientist and be able to actually train a model, kind of like you mentioned, Darren, about OpenAI has massive amounts of servers to do training.
Oh yeah.
That's a different story. Your little desktop computer is not going to be amazing for doing that, but doing a simple LLM and running a RAG model, it's not that difficult to do.
So, but those are more like personal. In fact, I kind of want to distinguish between personal Gen AI and private Gen AI, because private Gen AI would be more like enterprise. It would be like setting up your own private cloud
Yep.
with all the permissions, who has access to what data, who has access to what models
Yep.
connected to a RAG. There's a whole bunch of other things going on there that we forget about, right? Because this is a shiny object, right?
It is. It is. No, and that's a wonderful way of looking at it too. The private AI, we've got a lot of companies. Microsoft's looking at having Copilot and stuff like that. You can buy AI desktops now that have some sort of little AI augmentation to it to be able to kind of be a personal assistant on your computer. But when we talk about kind of an enterprise grade system as opposed to that personal one. Like you mentioned, the things that are important to me is I have to be able to make user accounts. I need to be able to set roles on the users. I need to be able to do access controls because I might want every user to have read-only access to HR, but I'm on the policy writing team, so I need to be a collaborator. I should be able to add documents and be able to modify documents in that. So that's an important piece. I should be able to audit, like, because as a personal one, I might not care about auditing. I need to be able
Yeah,
to.
but you most definitely, and there's going to be new rules on Gen AI and
Absolutely.
auditability.
Yep.
All that's going to start coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the other thing I love in what our research was when we originally started looking at how to be able to implement AI and generative AI and RAG into environments was I didn't want to be able to look at a single LLM because today it might be Llama, tomorrow it might be ChatGPT, the next day it could be mine. Who knows? So it's one of those things that I always liken that we should treat LMs a little bit like Nintendo cartridges, and as we need to switch them out because I'm sure the government's going to come up with a high trust LLM, and they're working on it.
Yeah, they'll probably train it themselves, right? Hey, this has been approved for all DOD. This one's been approved for all civilian,
And if
right?
my
No, I can
product
see
is
that
hard
happening.
written to an LLM, I'm screwed. I have not made something that's usable. So that's why with like our development, we make it where it's interchangeable so that as those changes happen, you know.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. You guys actually have a product that I can run on prem,
Mhm.
right? That helps with all the enterprise productization or deployability, productization, maintenance, auditability, all those things that we typically have in enterprise services
Mhm.
from an IT organization.
Yeah,
You guys have kind of bundled that all around this whole concept of the RAG plus LLM to provide private Gen AI.
that's right.
Is that
Yeah, that's accurate. It really started with my passion towards the Army and talking to the different commands of how they were dealing with it and how these complicated issues of writing policy and not knowing if your policy conflicts against NATO, Congress, presidential decree. Like, how do you know these things? And so I said, all right, let's start figuring out a way to be able to do it. And it's got to be simple. I think at that point, and I don't remember what the number was, but I think it was, they said that they had 42 data scientists in all Army wide. I'm like, there's no way of like I can't just give somebody a box and say, good luck, and have your data scientist come help you. So we created and pretty proud of it. It's a drop and drag, point and click, very simple user interface to be able to just make your accounts, give permissions, make collections of data, and ask questions. And it's very simple and try to give it all the different enterprise level pieces that were needed to be able to make it easy and safe.
so? You've kind of hidden the complexity of RAG, and even mentioning RAG, you just call them collections of. Hey, ask your collection a question.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of cool when you think about it, because what you've done is you've said, "Hey, my collection of data is self-aware," right?
Yeah.
Kind of, even though it's not. Let's not go that we've got a self-aware Gen AI, right?
Right.
No,
Yeah. Yeah. It
but
is really cool.
I can ask it questions. I can ask my collection of information questions. That's cool.
Yeah. And it's what's really fun about it too is we're constantly it haunts me at night because I'll sit there in bed and go, oh God, I wonder if I could solve this problem. And within 5 minutes, I've got it completely solved. And it's just a drop and drag. It's downloading documents, drop and dragging, and asking it questions. If I can, I just did one the other day that was so much fun. We just had the funding bill was just approved a month
Oh
ago.
yeah, yeah.
And if anyone hasn't seen what these funding bills look like, they're incredibly complicated, weird, 1800 looking, parchment looking papers. It's 1100 pages. And no one's reading that from
No
top
one's
to
gonna
bottom.
read that. Yeah.
And if you take what the content of a document is, it's probably 85% fluff at least, and then it's probably 15% content. And all I did was I dropped and dragged it into our model, and I said, "Explain to me the major points of the funding bill." And it says defense, blah blah blah. Goes through. And I go, "Tell me more about defense." Now, how would a Democrat feel about this? How would a Republican feel about it?
Wow.
What would Mitch McConnell think about this? If I was a Democrat and I wanted to negotiate with Mitch McConnell, what things could I potentially offer him to make him accept this bill? And within 5 minutes, I now could be an expert at this document. I have come up with strategies. I've at least collaborated with the document to
So,
help.
Jeff, you just replaced all of Congress just with.
I hope that we've just made it where they can make educated decisions.
Yes. Well, and that I'm glad we talked about that a little bit, because we humans still have to make decisions.
Yeah.
We don't want the Gen AI making decisions, right? We still need to make those decisions.
Yep.
So it's a tool. It's not a decision maker.
Yep.
It's a decision aid.
Yep.
It sifts through a lot of data that we can now ask it questions.
Absolutely. Like you brought up that guard scenario, but I had one that was really fun to watch with one of the government agencies. It was a 33,000 page PDF. Can you imagine? And it was a SQL manual. Can you imagine if you had a question, you're like, oh God, how do I blah, 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 Control F, and you find the word SQL, 7 billion times. But I showed him, I thought it was really funny. I took it and we put it in there and I said, ask any question you've ever wanted to know. And then they started asking, and very naturally came back and asked them questions. And that's been probably my favorite part of playing with generative AI is, especially on the Army side, we put in all the Army regulations and the field manuals in this, and you watch like a company commander or someone come in and they start asking questions. Then they kind of like look around, and then they start secretly asking the questions they always wish they knew the answer to. Like, oh, this is why I do what I do.
Oh, that's awesome.
So that's my favorite part of this. So,
hey, Jeff, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate your time today. And if people want to find out more about what you guys are offering, I love how you guys have packaged it all together.
Thank you.
Where do they find out more?
Yeah, so they can go to our website. So www.feddata.com/on-prem GPT.
Or on-prem GPT.
Or just find me on LinkedIn. I put lots of videos and I love talking about it. It's a lot of fun.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me, Darren. This was great. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Embracing Digital Transformation today. If you enjoyed our podcast, give it 5 stars on your favorite podcasting site or YouTube channel. You can find out more information about Embracing Digital Transformation at embracingdigital.org. Until next time, go out and embrace the digital revolution.